Right now, somewhere near you, a baby is being fed out of a plastic pouch. Twist the cap, squeeze the mush, done. Pureed sweet potato, organic pear, whatever. A whole industry exists just to turn food into something a toothless mouth can handle, and nobody thinks twice about it. It's just what you feed a baby. Here's the thing, though. You were that baby once. Every single person you've ever met made it through a stretch of life where they had no teeth, no words, and no ability to feed themselves, a stage where the wrong food could kill them. And soft baby food in a jar has existed for about 100 years. So what about the other 300,000? Because a species doesn't last that long by accident. Every ancestor you have in an unbroken line all the way back survived infancy without a single pouch of puree. The question is, how? How did ancient babies get through the deadliest transition of their lives, the jump from milk to food, with no blenders, no jars, and for most of history, no soft food at all? Let's start at the beginning. And the beginning is honestly a little gross. Before there was any technology to soften food, there was one tool that was always available: another person's mouth. Across cultures on every inhabited continent, mothers and grandmothers did something anthropologists call pre-mastication. They chewed the food themselves, meat, roots, tough plants, until it was a soft paste, and then passed it directly to the baby, mouth to mouth. It has a gentler name, too. Kiss feeding, I know. But sit with it for a second. It's brilliant. Chewing doesn't just mash the food. Saliva starts breaking down the starches before the baby ever swallows. It's a blender and a first stage of digestion in one, and it costs nothing. This wasn't a weird local custom. It was, for most of human history, the standard way to wean a child. It's so widespread and so old that some researchers think it goes back further than our own species. That solved the food. But food wasn't even the first line of defense, because before a baby needed solids at all, there was milk, and ancient humans nursed for a long time. In hunter-gatherer societies, breastfeeding often stretched to 3, sometimes 4 years, far longer than the few months that's now typical in the West. That long runway meant the jump to solid food was gentle, no cliff edge. The baby was already crawling, already grabbing at food, already growing teeth by the time milk started tapering off. And we can actually measure this now, which is one of the wilder tricks in modern science. Teeth grow in layers like tree rings, and they lock in a chemical record of what a person consumed while each layer formed. In 2013, a team led by Christine Austin showed you could read the element barium in those layers and see the exact moment a child moved off breast milk. Run that on ancient teeth, including Neanderthal ones, and the pattern appears. Steady nursing, then a transition, then weaning, often around 2.5 years old, a toddler's diet written into the enamel tens of thousands of years later. Then something changed the whole game. Humans domesticated animals. Once you have goats, sheep, and cattle, you have a new kind of milk, one that doesn't come from the mother. And that's a lifeline, because the single biggest danger to a baby was losing its mother, or a mother who couldn't produce enough. Animal milk gave ancient communities a backup food source for infants for the first time in history, and they used it. Here's what makes this so important. Weaning wasn't just a phase. It was the most dangerous moment of childhood, so dangerous that bioarchaeologists have a name for the spike in child deaths that clusters right around it, the weaning crisis. The baby loses the immune protection of breast milk. It starts eating food from a world full of bacteria, and its little body has to figure out how to survive on both at once. Think about what that means. How a society fed its babies wasn't a minor domestic detail. It was the bottleneck the entire population had to squeeze through generation after generation. Solve weaning and your people continue. Fail it and you don't. Everything else a culture ever built sat on top of getting this one thing right, which is why the next discovery is so haunting. In 2019, a team led by Julie Dunn studied strange little ceramic pots pulled from Bronze and Iron Age graves in Europe. small enough to fit in a baby's hands. Each one had a narrow spout, perfect for a tiny mouth to suck from. Archaeologists had wondered for years what they were for, so Dunn's team chemically analyzed the residue trapped inside. It was animal milk. These were baby bottles, 3,000 years ago. And here's the detail that stops you cold. They were found in the graves of infants, buried with the babies who drank from them. A parent, thousands of years ago, sending their child into the ground with the little cup they'd fed them from. That is a Bronze Age parent doing exactly what you'd do. The technology is ancient. The love is older. But the story doesn't end at happily ever after, because soft food had a dark side too. As people settled into farms and towns, they started making early soft foods, pastes of bread or flour boiled in water or milk, a mush called pap. On paper, a perfect baby food. In reality, often a killer, because there were no ways to sterilize anything. The mush sat out. The feeding vessels were nearly impossible to clean. In the Victorian era, some spouted feeding bottles were so notorious for breeding deadly bacteria that they earned a grim nickname, murder bottles. For a long stretch of history, the convenient soft food was more dangerous than a grandmother's chewed-up paste ever was. That's the twist. Premastication looks primitive. It was actually one of the safest options available, fresh, warm, half-digested, and passed from a mouth that shared the baby's germs already. Our ancestors weren't fumbling in the dark. They'd found something that worked, and it worked for hundreds of thousands of years. So, here's the full picture. A toothless baby and no soft food anywhere, solved by a caregiver's own chewing. Years of extended nursing that made the transition gentle instead of sudden. Tooth chemistry proving they weaned toddlers around 2.5. Domesticated animals handing humans a backup milk supply. Little spouted bottles buried with the babies they fed 3,000 years ago. And a long, deadly detour through contaminated PIP before we finally, recently made soft food that was actually safe. Every one of those solutions kept the line going, and the line ends with you. Because here's the strange truth of it. You are the direct result of every single one of those babies surviving. Not most of them. All of them in your particular line. An unbroken chain of infants who made it through the most dangerous month of their lives, fed by someone who refused to let them go. Some of them were kept alive by a grandmother chewing their dinner for them. That is not a metaphor. That is your actual ancestry. So the next time you twist the cap off a pouch of baby food, you're holding the very end of a very long story, the easiest version of a problem that once killed more children than anything else on Earth. 300,000 years of humans figuring out over and over how to keep the smallest, weakest version of us alive. They got it right just often enough. That's the only reason any of us are here. If that made you look at a jar of baby food a little differently, stick around, and there's a lot more where that came from.